Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. And welcome to today's DevOps.com discussion brought to you by the TechStrong Group. We've got an exciting discussion ahead of you, but before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. Today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any of today's discussion and you'd like to share it with your friend, the on-demand version is being recorded and will be made available to you shortly after this webinar concludes. If you have any questions, we'd love for you to post all of your questions, any of your questions. Keep this fun, keep this great in the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. We've also got a chat tab where you can communicate with the presenters, engage with your other audience members. Again, share your thoughts, just keep everything fun and let us know where you're tuning in from as well. We'd love to know that. Finally, at the conclusion of the webinar, I'm going to be coming back on with my camera and handing out 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please be sure to stick around. It is for those who are here for the entirety of the program. Today's topic is going to be the impact of low-code, no-code. At this time, I'm going to turn my webcam off and turn the program over to you, Mike.
All right, great. Thanks, Jared. Hey, guys, good to see you all. Let's just get started with some level setting because I'm not sure that everybody has got the same level of experience who's attending this. Some folks are really experienced and others are newbies, but let's just start with Deepak. We've been talking about low-code, no-code tools for a long time, and in some ways they're just a new name for stuff that we've been doing all along. But my question to you is, at this juncture, how much of what we're doing for application development is being driven by these types of tools? Have they become the dominant tool for building applications, or are they just one of many? And what's your sense of where are we on the curve?
Yeah. Mike, so let me, answer that with exactly, I come from a low-code platform. I'm the CTO of Wavemaker, which is a low-code platform. And working with Wavemaker, we kind of address a lot of application needs from different enterprises who are adopting low-code for varied set of applications. So typically, if you look at most low-code, no-code platforms are trying to address digital automation app use cases like employee onboarding, line of business apps, internal dashboards. So I call these as tactical apps, mostly tactical in nature. They cater to the needs of automation internally within the organization. There are this another spectrum of applications which are predominantly focusing on customer experience, or you can call it consumers, who are availing services from these enterprises. Apps like customer onboarding apps, online mobile banking solutions, loan origination. So these are apps which have a customer experience element. They are external facing, and the nature of these applications are different. So these are very strategic in nature. So the way how we see most low-code and no-code platforms cater to this tactical, the first variant of the applications. And you see very few low-code platforms addressing the more strategic ones, which have a maximum demand in terms of the consumer experience or the customer, the user experience aspect of it, right? And there is a third spectrum, which is those modernization of core systems, which are more intricate. These require replacing the technical stack or the technology stack, moving to more modern stacks. I don't think low-code platforms are addressing those kind of needs yet. So this is how I kind of see where the need of apps being built with low-code is felt. And most organizations are looking to address these kind of apps using a low-code, no-code platform.
Shiva, first of all, introduce yourself, but secondarily, do you see the same thing? Is there classes of applications that lend themselves more to this, or is it just kind of where we happen to be at the moment?
Thanks for having me on this webinar, Mike. So to introduce myself, I am Shiva Nathan, founder, CEO of Onimus. We come from the completely other end of the spectrum. We call ourselves a pro code company, meaning that professional code being developed for very high-end applications. we do see it's a good webinar and good discussion that we're going to have here in the next 45 minutes or so, because we're going to have two different perspectives, one from the low code perspective and another from the pro code perspective. There is definitely a need for a lot of code to be written. There's a need for a lot of applications to be written in the industry. All companies in the world are technology companies now. Even if you're selling sugared water, you are not a sugared water soda company anymore. You're looking at data analysis of your consumers. Which stadium do I need to go sell the sugared water at and stuff? So every company is a technology company. And there needs to be a lot of software applications, be it web applications, mobile applications, that need to be developed. And of course, to satisfy the demand, the huge demand, there's technologies of low code, no code that brings up a lot of people that don't have a computer science or computer engineering background to be able to develop applications faster within the DevOps space and stuff. There's a demand, and there is a supply that's being catered to by the low code, no code. Given that, there is still a huge market for professionally written code for the high end of the applications. So that's where we see the market going, which is there's a huge demand. There are demands that are extremely sophisticated on one end that pro code companies like Onimus solve for. Then there's a demand on the other hand that doesn't need professional developers that can do well with drag and drop and creating applications that low code, no code developers or platforms can solve for. So that's where we see the industry going.
Deepak, do you agree with that? Because I think I see a lot of professional developers using at least low-code tools as well. So are they doing that because they're in a rush and there's a backlog, or are people that committed to one thing versus the other, or are they kind of like, hey, we'll use whatever tool we need on any given day?
Yes. So there has been a significant trend shift since the pandemic has started, or just around the pandemic. So the low-code platforms have appealed more to, initially, if you look at, they kind of created the whole citizen developer kind of a new mythical kind of a developer, right? So I call that why, because I think in reality there are very few citizen developers, those who don't have any technology background and have the ability to build applications. That means they have to be literally platforms which dumb down to probably a no-code platform with a few kind of configuration aspects, where you create a very simple, employee onboarding application or an order processing kind of an application. So I don't want to go into the use cases, but there are probably a small segment of those use cases where you could create these apps. But to answer, to come back to your point of professional developers using low code, right? So with the push towards more and more, kind of bringing the digital automation, and with the push from the pandemic, I see that personally at Wavemaker, we have seen a shift in trend where earlier there were these non-IT teams looking for low code and asking us, hey, we don't have a technology team, we don't have developers, probably we have one developer in the team, can we build an application? Two, what we are seeing now is actually the developers coming and trying to evaluate low-code platforms. The kind of use cases have changed, right? So that said, we are clearly seeing a trend where more and more professional developers are coming under a rush, probably from the senior leadership, that hey, if you have to go to market faster, and if you have to really roll out these applications faster, you need to look at low code. So yes, there has been a rush. And the another aspect is, I think the important aspect is to appeal to professional developers. There are a totally different set of aspects of platforms, right? So in terms of whether can these developers really play with the code? Do they have access to the code from these platforms? Can they really understand the architecture which is created behind the scenes? Do they have flexibility in deploying these applications to their own cloud. So all these aspects come into play when professional developers evaluate low-code platforms.
Shiva, do you see the same thing? It seems to me when I talk to a lot of these folks who are using low-code tools, they do value the ability to drop out of that to be able to use pro code underneath that. And sometimes it's different people doing different things. And I got one developer who might be, have a certain level of experience, but then they want to give it to somebody else who wants to extend the app using pro code. So is the world kind of more hybrid than we think?
I'll try to answer that with an analogy that just popped up in my mind when Deepak was talking, Mike. So the analogy that popped up in my mind was there used to be movie production houses, the Steven Spielbergs of the world shooting movies, right? And that used to be what software development was about in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. You had to go get a PhD or at least an engineering degree to develop code. You have to go to a movie studio to learn how to use the cameras and jigs and take the wonderful movies that Steven Spielberg did, right? Now, everyone and their aunt has got an iPhone or an Android phone with a camera with them, which is a low-code, no-code tools. Can they shoot movies? Absolutely, yes, they can. It's a completely different use case. Does it make a professional? Does Steven Spielberg use an iPhone to take movies? Yeah, for his grandchild's birthday, he's not bringing his big red camera and taking movies, right, of a child's birthday party. So the professional developers, would they use low-code, no-code? Depends on the use case. Steven Spielberg will absolutely use an iPhone to take a birthday video, right? But at the same time, the question that you need to ask is not what your skill sets are, whether you are the Steven Spielberg or whether you're an 85-year-old grandma trying to take a movie. The question that you need to ask is, what is the application that you're trying to develop? What are you trying to do? How many such videos do you have to produce and do it? Same thing with citizen journalism, right? Everyone, there are great journalists like you that are doing these webinars here. And then there's a person with a microphone and a phone that have journalists walking around, right? So that's the same thing with the low-code, pro-code, and no-code.
All right. Well, Deepak, since he brought it up, here's the fundamental criticism that you hear from folks on the professional developer side, from some quarters, not everywhere, but basically they say, a lot of these applications that are built by whether we think citizen developers exist or not, but let's just say lower, less experienced developers is, they're a little bit on the ugly side. They don't scale very well, and they're maybe insecure. So are we getting better at kind of putting guardrails in place that prevent that from happening? What is kind of the developer experience like these days? Because not every platform is the same. So what are we seeing there?
Right. Yeah. I'll basically answer two aspects of it, because again, so there is this general impression of low code in the market, and as you rightly said, no two low code platforms are the same. Each one have their own bells and whistles. They come up with different capabilities. They cater to different even persona, right? So in that aspect, Wavemaker is a low code platform, or rather I would say it is a composable application development platform, which uses a low-code paradigm. But behind the scenes, actually you see real code. You see architecture which appeals to a developer. You see a technology stack which is more friendly to web developers who would like to build applications using Angular or their own language or a framework of choice, or even on the back end. So basically you get to choose, or you have the popular choices made available so that developers can really like the technology stack, the approach and the architecture, everything is made transparent. So using Wavemaker. But not every low-code platform does the same, right? There are many low-code platforms which are built on proprietary stack. So they are targeting citizen developers who don't understand how to code, or probably they don't have, like Shiv mentioned, they may not have a computer science degree or a PhD or whatnot, right? So for these developers or citizen developers, the approach to low code is totally different from what a platform has to offer to developers or those who know how to build applications. And yeah, they probably have the skills, but they are looking at something else to use a low code platform. So that could be the time to market or the kind of effort savings, or probably the kind of pre-packaged components and pre-packaged integrations which make the whole development much quicker and faster, unlike a traditional way of building applications.
Shiva, meanwhile, on the other side of the spectrum, the professional code is getting more challenging to write because we're living in the age of cloud native and containers and microservices and serverless frameworks and lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, somebody's got to manage all that and make all that work. So do you think on the other side of the coin, will the platforms used for writing professional code also become more abstracted so it becomes easier for more people to use? Or do I always have to be, a world-class expert?
Wonderful question. So we are at a point in time in 2022 where the professional code has become complex. No one is writing an application in their own little space of the universe. Your application depends on so many different services from big cloud providers like AWS, Azure, or GCP, or other service providers like Stripe or PayPal or what have you, right? So where we come from in the professional code or pro code space is that we are trying to create the next level of source code level abstractions with our company Onimus, right? Where we try to push the technology to the next layer of abstraction. If you think about technology, going back to 70s and 80s to now, the big jumps in technology has always been the next level of abstraction. There were people writing device control codes to control devices. Operating system came up. Then there were people writing applications to different operating systems. Then we had Java come up that said, don't worry about all these operating systems, we'll take care of it. We at Onimus believe that we are creating this next level of technology abstraction where we say, yep, there are all these cloud APIs and SaaS SP APIs out there. We are creating the next level of technology abstraction for you to write your professional code for trying to create your professional applications, right? But echoing Deepak's point, there is definitely a market for low code, no code. I see some of the chat messages are asking, is there a market for low code, no code? Absolutely, there's a market for low code, no code, right? There are applications, and about Deepak said, Waymaker is a different type of company probably compared to the other low code, no code providers in terms of how much control do you provide? Are you an iPhone 3 or an iPhone 14 when it comes to taking your kid's birthday video? Does your iPhone 3 allow for editing the video, which your iPhone 14 does not, right? So going back to my movie analogy, that's the same thing. So low code, no code, there is a market depending on application. So start with the end game in mind. What are you trying to create? And then choose. And if you're going to create a very professional applications, don't go, what we're trying to tell is, if you're going to create the next Uber application, don't try creating that with a low code, no code tool, because when you try to scale to come to become a level, then you'll be stuck within the confines of the low code, no code. Start with the pro code. But if your application is going to be for your restaurant, you want your people that are going to come and dine in your restaurant to have a restaurant application called Mike Wizard's Diner, right? Then great, go with a low code, no code tool. So that's what we've been telling the world.
All right, I'm just telling you right now that the food in that diner is going to suck, so don't go there. Deepak, we see that there are more applications being developed than ever. What is the impact that will have on DevOps? Are we going to, see all this stuff moving through the pipelines that we have today, or is there some alternative mechanism for deploying these things? And how do we manage this process once we get all these people, writing code?
Right. So definitely there are more applications coming through the DevOps pipeline. There's no doubt about it. You can, look at the kind of support cloud providers itself have, offered in completing the whole DevOps they've started to offer pipeline automation tools, right, to bring these applications to cloud. So I kind of have a different opinion in terms of the low-code applications coming to the DevOps kind of a pipeline, right? So like I said, most of these tactical applications built using the typical low-code platforms, right? Most of these platforms, they offer their own cloud, their own customized cloud with their own DevOps toolkit, probably some CLIs, right? Which are completely proprietary in nature, which work very closely with these low-code platforms, and you have to learn them and adopt these to be able to build the applications, right? Which would work out very good for these tactical apps, just like Shiva mentioned about the diner app, right? So the automation kind of an app, digital apps which cater to internal enterprise or line of business apps. Yes, you could probably put through these low-code proprietary DevOps tools and get the job done. Whereas there are these other, kind of spectrum of applications which are customer centric. You are deploying to a large number of user base, like customer service portals or customer onboarding application, which has to scale to a growing number of users, right? They may need to have a horizontal scalability built into the services which are built into these apps. So you need to be very sure how you scale. So in which case you'll have to put through the regular DevOps toolkit using the build systems, and probably using cloud, or even for that matter, Kubernetes kind of a containerization platform, which can help you scale and kind of cater to these large complex applications, right? So these kind of apps definitely need the scale, and also for rollouts you may have to support canary or a blue-green kind of deployment model, because these are customer facing apps and you need to upgrade and update these applications very frequently. So for these kind of apps, I'm not sure how the typical low-code platforms are able to cater. So that's a kind of a doubt, or basically something which I am not very sure how the low-code platforms are catering to these kind of apps. But in WaveMaker, since we use the standard open standards-based technology stack, and we don't reinvent the wheel in terms of DevOps, you can build an application using WaveMaker and use your Jenkins to build and deploy to your own cloud, because the tech stack is an open standard stack, and we have not reinvented the wheel in terms of the build, test, or deploy processes for building WaveMaker applications.
All right, so sounds like I can have my cake and eat it too. I can deploy out using an automated process that exists within the platform, or I can pop in through an integration into Jenkins and use my traditional CI/CD flow. So that brings
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So the way how most enterprises use our platform is the platform, the low-code platform, is used for development purposes. Then they integrate with their own CI/CD pipeline, right? Once the development is done, so basically you got the accelerated development. Okay, let me put through my regular DevOps and build and test process to continue leveraging what enterprises and DevOps teams have built for years together, right? They have arrived at this, sophisticated DevOps tool set. I don't think, low-code platforms can reinvent the wheel.
All right. Shiva, are you starting? Go ahead.
Yeah, if you can just add to that, Mike, right? And then if I take your question very literally in terms of how much application code is going through the DevOps today, right? There are two trends at play. If you think about the amount of code going through the DevOps, one trend at play is this simple answer of demand. There's a huge demand for applications, which essentially means that yep, a lot of code has to go through the DevOps to come out the other end as production applications, right? But at the same side, if you look at the application itself, I would wager to say that for every line of code that's in an application, there are 10 lines of code written by someone else that their application depends on, be it GCP, be it Azure, be it AWS, or someone like that. So there's a trend of number of codes that you actually write for application going down, if you think about it. Yep, there are more applications you have to write, but you have to write less code per application. Percentage of code per application that you have to write is going down overall. And the DevOps, the more mature DevOps are not just looking at pushing the application code coming from their development teams. The more mature DevOps teams out there have started thinking in terms of, hey, this is the code that my engineering team has given for me to push through the system to do my testing and stuff. Have they put the safeguards against the dependencies that they have from the other SaaS providers? Is this application code building against 2.0 of this API coming from another vendor, or 3.0 of that API? And what happens when that changes, right? So the DevOps role is not within the company, inward facing, looking at what's coming from their dev team, picking it up and testing and going through it. The DevOps team is like more 90% focus outside, the good ones. The good ones have to focus 90% outside in the periphery, 10% on the code that's coming from the engineering team to get something out. So that's where the challenges of the DevOps teams are.
And to your point, the application that they're actually deploying may be made up of different low-code services from different providers of different platforms that is being melded with professional code developed by the internal DevOps team. And I got to figure out how to make this whole thing orchestrate in a way that results in, updates being made that don't break because of all these different dependencies. Who has the skills to do that? I mean, is that like, the very small percentage of the DevOps community, and that's where we're going to in the future? Or do you think most organizations are kind of there?
So if I can go first, Deepak. So I think that application development teams, or the leaders of the application development teams, need to have one throat to choke. The one throat to choke could be that if you're trying to build an application with 20 different integrations where you have to depend on 20 different providers, you're toast. You are losing right off the bat. So that's where we think that the technology abstraction that we are pushing out from Onimus for professional applications that needs to be developed is, you have one throat to choke, which is my company, Onimus, where you come to say, you are responsible for all these integrations with all these cloud players and service provider players, and we are responsible for just our business application alone. So between you as a DevOps team, or you as an engineering leader managing your DevOps and engineering team, have your engineering team and one throat to choke. That makes it a lot easier. If not, then you go into the problem that you talk about and you describe, Mike.
Yeah. Deepak, is he making a case for you in this regard? If I have to manage all that through the DevOps platforms, and I go use the low-code tools from Salesforce, and then I go use the low-code tools from ServiceNow, and then I got low-code tools from, pick 3 other SaaS providers, and I'm trying to manage code that was generated on all of those platforms, might it not make more sense just to have one low-code platform that touches all of those and then ship into the DevOps pipeline that way?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting aspect, right? Like you mentioned about multiple low-code or no-code platforms being used for different use cases, but you have to now put them all through a single pipeline. I don't agree on that aspect. I don't think that's going to happen, because if you typically see each of these platforms, as I said earlier, have their own DevOps toolkit. And the dependencies are not like the way how pro coders, bring their own dependencies, build their applications, so they know exactly whether it is 2.0 version of a library or some other version of a component being used. Most of these low-code platforms have abstracted out that aspect, so you are not getting into the dependency matrix issue with low-code platforms. That's typically a problem with traditional app development teams who kind of are pro coders who are basically owning the libraries and the components and integrations which they are bringing into their apps. Whereas the low-code platforms kind of they box the whole thing, right? It's kind of a black box where everything is inside, and you may not have much visibility in terms of which versions of some tech stack these platforms have used and what kind of capabilities they had given to low-code developers to extend or bring their own extensions. So it all depends on that.
Yeah. Shiva, we've been talking about CI/CD as a thing that drives DevOps pipelines forever and a day. For the most part, we see a lot of CI and very little CD. Do you think as we kind of put together these low-code tools and professional tools that maybe we'll revisit the way we think about CD and maybe try to do some things that are maybe a little less tightly coupled so that we can enable this level of integration that's required? And I guess what I'm getting at is, are the pipelines we have in place today a little too rigid and too many scripts that we use for some really lightweight continuous deployment, but they're not really going to scale in any meaningful way?
All right. The problem that you're alluding to, Mike, is actually a symptom of a much bigger problem in my mind, which is there is less CD and a lot more CI because of what I call the lowest common denominator problem. The lowest common denominator problem essentially is you are trying to build something and you're dependent on so many different things. You're trying to pick the lowest common denominator version that will work. For example, hey, version 1.0 of this and version 1.0 of this and version 1.0 of this work together. The moment I try to go to version 2.0 of anything, all hell break loose. I don't want to do that. Let me be safe. Let me be conservative. Let me just stay with the 1.0, be it low code, no code, or be it in pro code, right? Because people are worried about breaking something in the integration, going to the cutting edge of something. So there's one SaaS provider that provides you a cutting edge of something. You go, oh my God, that's going to bleed. The cutting edge is going to bleed for me because that's not going to work with all the other guys who have not caught up to it, right? And that's why you don't have CD part of it, which is the continuous deployment piece of it, because you're trying to play conservative, right? And once we solve that problem with the next level of abstraction, like what we provide, I think we can really bleed in the cutting edge without bleeding. So that's where we think the game is going to go in the long term.
We have some questions coming in from the audience, and sometimes they make me laugh because they just cut to the chase. So we have one question. I'm just going to start with both of you, and maybe you can give an answer. And the question is pretty simple. It says, so what is the future of software development? What should people expect? Where are we going? What's next? And what should we be planning for? Deepak, you want to take a shot at that first?
Yeah, so it's very interesting, Mike and Shiv. So the way how the software development is going to, definitely adopt the low code, no code platforms for certain use cases. That's what we are already seeing a trend. But however, the traditional way of developing applications, of course, that's definitely meant for certain use cases, more complex systems to be built. Of course, products, SaaS companies, they continue to, kind of build their products and applications using the traditional way. Probably they would move more to this abstractions where, like Shiv mentioned about using certain abstractions which make their life easy, which don't have to deal with too much of this the dependencies and version incompatibility challenges. So I hope there's more abstraction which is provided, the right level of abstraction which makes sense for them to move faster and make the whole development process easier and less painful. However, the adoption of low code, no code platforms is going to increase. There will be some kind of convergence, but I don't think one would replace the other.
All right. Shiva, where do you see the world headed? What's your opinion on what's next?
So from where I sit, Mike, what I see is there are going to be a lot more applications that's going to be built by enterprises and even individuals for their own sophisticated needs, right? Very soon you will find you writing your own application to chat with your family, for example, or do just a social sharing with your family and stuff. There's going to be a lot of that. So everyone and their cousin is going to become quote unquote an application developer using some kind of a tool to develop something. There's going to be a groundswell of applications on the bottom end. But on the top end, what we don't see yet in this country, but is available in some other countries, is the growth of super applications. There are going to be some super applications that are going to come out of something that Elon Musk has recently said as well. Love him or hate him, but what he said, that there's going to be one application that is going to be on your phone or usage that's going to take care of everything that you want to do, starting from paying your bills to communicating with your friend to emailing to everything. There's going to be a growth of super apps that's going to happen as well on the top end, built with professional code where the technology limits get pushed. You are on the cutting edge of technology. There are going to be super apps that's going to come. We don't see that yet. There are some that's available in other parts of the world. We're going to have that. There's going to be a groundswell of low-level applications for very sophisticated tic-tac-toe use cases, I'd like to call them. There are going to be people that want to develop the game that only 25 of the people in the world play. They're going to develop the application and do it, and only 25 of the people are going to play. So that's where I see it going. Groundswell and a very large application space.
So super apps and micro apps, aka microservices that are kind of living off of the edge of the super app, because why reinvent the same wheel over and over again? Is that what you're kind of pointing towards?
They might not even be interacting with each other. The same way that there are mega, big, large studios that are creating the interstellar movies of the world, and there's everyone running with a phone taking a movie. I think there'll be a huge gap, the chasm between the big production houses and the big journalism houses in media space, and citizen journalists and citizen movie makers in the bottom. So that's what I think is going to happen. There's going to be a huge dichotomy in the industries where I see the industry heading to.
Deepak, how smart will the low-code, no-code platforms get to the point where, am I going to need to know anything about coding, or can I just walk in and say, I need an app that does this through my voice-enabled assistant, and then, some platform like yours will just go crank it out for me?
Yes. So I think those are going to be purpose-built low-code application platforms, right? So you know that there are certain use cases which the low-code platform does best, where you don't have to do much. You just click a button or give some configuration. It creates the app or whatever the service you wanted to get it done. So these are purpose-built applications. Yes, definitely, as Shiv mentioned about, there's going to be a groundswell of these small use case apps, right, where built for a very, very predefined set of use cases. Yes, definitely there will be low-code platforms which can mimic that and get the job done very quickly for you, right? Whereas the on the other side of the spectrum, the low-code platforms are, it's like, typically the way the software industry, the way how it's shaping up in the last 20 years, if you see, there are layers of abstractions built. That's what we are seeing. Like at one point of time, we used to deal with operating systems, and then now there are the programming languages and the frameworks have come on top of that. Now we are seeing the web applications, and with the proliferation of mobile, right, there are abstractions at every layer, right? So low-code platforms are going to add one more abstraction to that, right? And it gives the abstraction and gives the control, just like Java has been like a magic way back in 1998 or 99 when it started. Hey, okay, we don't have to deal with the memory manipulation or other aspects. So low-code platforms are going to emerge to that kind of an abstraction with the right kind of control so that you can operate at an abstracted way of building applications.
Shiva, what's your best advice to the DevOps team as we describe this brave new world of application development? But am I still wedded to the notion that there's one magic pipeline for everything, or do I kind of start thinking about, branches off of pipelines that I'm using for different classes of code, moving at different rates of speed? Or how should I be thinking about the world as a DevOps engineer going forward, given what we just said about how the application development process is changing?
So I'll first start by saying, look outside more than inside. The DevOps role is no longer within the four walls of an enterprise. look at what's happening outside more, because that's where your application dependencies are a lot more than what it was even like 2 years back or 5 years back. Understand the impact of the other ecosystem changes around you that's going to have on your job. You cannot be the world's best DevOps engineer or work in the world's best DevOps team just looking inwards going forward. That will be the one thing that I would want to share, the DevOps teams of the world.
As we think about the code that we're creating in these different levels of abstraction, Deepak, it almost seems like to me, and I'll apologize for the metaphor, but I feel like I'm listening to Republicans and Democrats argue about something, and it's just a question of, some people are borrowing other people's ideas and calling it their own at different times, right? The low-code guys seem to be incorporating a lot of DevOps concepts and automating that. And if I look at the DevOps side of the world, they're starting to borrow a lot of these abstractions that are, kind of low-code looking at the very least. But you invoke them through a CLI or a GUI, depending on what your mood is. So are we kind of, and I'll start with Deepak, are we kind of moving to the middle here a little bit? And there's a little bit of, we're talking about the same thing, just coming at it from a different angle.
Yeah, like I said before, right? So typically, if you look at I kind of alluded to Wavemaker being more open in terms of the way how we approached the whole thing. We didn't want to reinvent the role of a DevOps, right? With a custom-built DevOps toolkit for our low-code platforms, right? So that way what happens is you're trying to leverage what's already tested and tried out there in the market. If somebody wants to build using Jenkins, okay, you take the code and build it using whatever tool you are comfortable with, right? That's one aspect in terms of not reinventing the wheel, but, standardizing or going with what the industry had seen, right? That's one aspect. And yes, there has been a lot of, typically low-code platforms are trying to provide the best of what they could learn from the SaaS world of how the DevOps is done, and then try to create their own tool set for doing DevOps. And here I see actually there is a bit of fragmentation. So the way how typical low-code platforms do DevOps could be very different from how a traditional way of the DevOps deploying the application or integrating with the cloud infrastructure for deployment.
Shiva, what's your take on it? Are we, are we learning from each other in ways that we don't care to admit?
No, I think it's the evolution of business, Mike, which is. I love analogies, so I'll give another analogy of a restaurant and a dessert shop, right? So you start a restaurant, and then very soon you start to give more desserts add more desserts in the menu because you got a baker in the house, right? And then there's a person that starts a dessert shop, goes like, hey, I make desserts really well, but people are going to the restaurant next door to do it. I'm going to start giving some appetizers in my shop too, and then I make a restaurant out of it. It's a land grab out there. So once you're really good at one thing, you're looking at your peripheral areas to grab onto. So the DevOps team, DevOps companies are looking at it and saying, hey, you know what? I can do what the low-code, no-code guys are doing. I can do that a little bit better because I know exactly how to push this into production. I'm really good at this. I'm going to go grab that. The low-code, no-code companies out there are saying, you know what? Why do I have to leave money on the table for them to go purchase another CI/CD tool to push this into production? Why don't I provide that as an integrated thing? And that's always going to happen in any industry, any technology, right? And it comes to a point whether it's the best of the breed or you go to one shop to buy everything. So that's what it is. And it's a very healthy thing to see. With CI/CD moving into low-code, no-code, and low-code, no-code moving into CI/CD, it's a very healthy thing to see. And in the professional space, whether you buy the engines from Rolls-Royce for a plane and the fuselage from Boeing, or if you want to buy everything from one company, it's left to you and your use case. So you should always go back to what your use case is and start from there and then work backwards from there.
Yeah. So that's where the one-click deployment is very popular in the low-code world. So just you click. There's no DevOps.
Yes.
All right. Sounds like Darwin has come to software engineering. We have a question here, though, from our audience who wants to know, and there's a debate about what the term itself means, but what do you think the impact of no code, low code will have on this whole concept of platform engineering? Shiva, it starts on your side, so let's start with you. Do you think that platform engineering is fundamentally different as a concept than what we've been talking about as DevOps? And if so, how's that going to evolve?
It all depends on how you define platform engineering. There are multiple definitions of what platform engineering is. If you go back to the traditional definition of platform engineering is where, hey, there is a platform stack that I want to make as my company's stack, and I want to do everything around that particular thing, and I want to release applications on part of that. Then I think that's a concept of the past. There are open standards and stuff, but there are a lot of different platform engineering work that you have to do across the dependencies that you're depending on, right? I know my answer is neither here nor there. It's a lot more complex and a much different discussion than what we are trying to have right here.
All right, so I think the answer was depends. Deepak, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think see, if you look at the platform engineering is mostly it emerged from the SaaS world. Like every SaaS service is essentially building a platform, right? But if you look at the enterprises talking more and more about creating microservices and creating an API layer, so everybody is seeing or they got inspired from the success of these SaaS organizations which operated like a platform, and they wanted to replicate that in an enterprise world so that IT can actually create a platform internally, create an API layer, and then imagine that they are actually building a platform. So that I think that model is replicated by many large enterprises which were actually not doing that earlier, right? So that's what I could add in terms of the platform engineering aspect. So with that, the way how DevOps used to happen earlier, like very fragmented even within an enterprise, because you have a varied set of tool sets, right? Different teams are using different build systems, in fact, there is an infrastructure fragmentation within enterprise. There's a cloud, there's hybrid cloud, and somebody uses on-prem, right? So I think that probably could converge, and probably everybody tries to fall in play with a platform engineering kind of a model.
All right. So to Shiva's earlier point, Darwin will find his way to DevOps platforms too, and that'll create these platform engineering things. And that's kind of the natural order of things. Shiva, let me ask you something about the pipelines we have today. Is there a bias in those pipelines towards professional code, and they need to be kind of looked at and said, how do we make them a little more low code friendly, or can they easily be adapted as they are?
I hate to be repeating the same thing. It depends on the use case, Mike. I see mistakes being made in both ends of the spectrum. In one end of the spectrum, I see companies picking up a low-code, no-code tool to build an application. They build it, they go 1-2 years into it and find out that they've outgrown that particular low-code, no-code tool and go, oh my God, I would scrap the whole thing and start from scratch and do professional code, right? And the other end of the spectrum, for very simple use case, which could have been very well serviced by a low-code, no-code, I see a bunch of professional engineers being hired and a professional development team put into place to develop something that could have as easily been done by a low-code, no-code tool out there. And you put it in, and it's not going to change for the next 15 years, which is like a lifetime in technology, not even 15, 5 years in technology, right? They could have done it well. So you have to start from the basics in terms of what is your use case, what is the end state. Are you willing to refactor this 2 years from now from a low code, no code to pro code, or are you over investing in a pro code which could have easily been done? So that will give you the final answer in terms of where you want to be.
Yeah. Deepak, is there anything that you see customers doing that just makes you shake your head and go, why are you doing it this way when, clearly there's just a better way of thinking about integrating low code with DevOps platforms? Is there something that you can tell people that, if you don't do it this way, you're going to pay a much higher idiot tax? So, what comes to mind as things that you've seen that just go, boy, I wish I could talk to them before they get any further?
Yes, so at least, we have not run into those situations because, like I said, Wavemaker uses a standards-based, DevOps integration approach. So we don't run into the situations where, it's a kind of a deviation, or we wanted the way the deployment happened was, totally the way how the platform defined, not like that. Going back to Shiv's point, I think he was. I totally agree with what he has mentioned about the use cases, right? I think it all depends on the nature of applications. That was very important aspect, right? So the nature of applications defines the right low code platform put to use, and also its own DevOps process. And like he said, there may not be a rigid DevOps process which is needed for certain type of applications, right? Because maybe they are not updated frequently, they are not going through a canary or a blue-green kind of deployment model. So all of these aspects define which platform you use and what type of DevOps you use for delivering these apps.
Yeah.
Another aspect might add to it, right? You also have to look at whether this application is external facing for your enterprise or internal facing. And that kind of decides a lot of things when it comes to CI/CD, when it comes to what tool you use and build an application as well. If your application is going to be used internally by 300 of your sales team, right, and doesn't require to be updated every 3 days when an update comes out, right? Why invest in CI/CD, and why you have to have some minimal CI/CD, but why invest in a very sophisticated everyday build and deploy kind of CI/CD when it's going to be used only by 300 of your employees for the lifetime of your company, essentially, right? So that's another aspect.
So don't try to swat that fly with a cannon, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Deepak, what's your best advice for folks then? Is this a cultural issue or a technical issue ultimately, and which of those things should I go after first? Do I go after the culture and kind of see if I can get everybody on the right page before I go figuring out all the technology nuances? Or is there, I build the tech and I hope that everybody figures it out because the culture will eventually change one way or another?
Yeah, I think there is no straight answer for that. It depends on the nature of the business, and we talked about the type of the applications, right? So I don't think there is a one solution for the whole organization, right? So typically I see this, many organizations, many large organizations try to put the whole technology stack and technology solution under one big umbrella, and tend to fail in integrating multiple teams, multiple cultures, multiple types, nature of the businesses, right? Each business has different needs for how they consume applications, consume data, and create data, right? So I think, like you said, in a typical organization, you see this multiple cultures, right? You see this different nature of applications. So I don't think there's one solution, or we should be looking at unifying either the DevOps or even the use of platforms for solving the application problems, right? So it is varied and it differs. And of course, the cultures, as you rightly said, defines some of these decisions being made. Like if you're predominantly an engineering developer-centric culture, you don't really adopt a typical no-code or a low-code platform. So because you're self-sufficient, you are probably more efficient, you have the right skills to deliver. Versus the other side of the coin where, okay, you need help and you need the other benefits which the platform-led strategy brings you.
All right, Shiva, you like metaphors. So do I take everybody and throw them in a room and lock the door until reason prevails, or do I let 1,000 flowers bloom? What's it going to be?
Gotta have 1,000 flowers bloom, Mike. It's all about the diversity of mindset and opinions and stuff. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's the problem with most development shops, which is the vice president has used a low-code, no-code tool in an application the last time around. And now every application that needs to be developed looks like a best candidate for low-code, no-code. Or the flip side is, hey, I have done professional development with smart engineers all through my life. I can build this next thing, putting all the engineers and reinventing the wheel over and over again. The idea is to say, you know what? I do not know which is the best thing. I want to have an open mind to what this application needs. And I'm going to let the application be the hero that decides what the plot of this movie is going to be, rather than me, who's the camera, going to decide what the plot of the movie is going to be, kind of a thing. Right? So that's what it should be.
Deepak, you want to add to that? Is there too much bias in the world among professional developers against low-code tools? And maybe that's part of our issue is, we need to just figure out, right tool for the right job.
Yeah, so definitely I think there is a bias because of one is there are a lot of low-code platforms out there, and to really arrive at which is the bet is the challenge. I have seen some organization evaluating some 16, 17 low-code platforms over a year, trying to arrive at which suits best for not just one application, but a big ton of applications, right? And in the process, a lot of professional developers get involved. They see the nuances. They see, finally the decision is made. Hey, there are challenges. Okay, reskilling is an issue. Okay, there are these security challenges or scale challenges. So a lot of things. Those are the biases typically I see. The professional developers typically feel, okay, low-code platforms may not scale, may not secure well. And again, all of these impressions are made from specific platforms they evaluate. But I don't think there is a general trend which is emerging because there is no standardization in low-code platforms. Each platform behaves differently.
All right, folks, an hour has flown by. This is kind of like a conversation I have with my children about how come I never asked them what they got in college for grades. And I always say, because no one's ever going to ask me what you got in college for a grade. They're just going to ask me whether you graduated or not. So it's all about the outcome. Hey, Jared, take us out.
All right, everyone, that was outstanding. Deepak, Shiva, I want to thank you for taking the time and sharing your expertise with us. Quick reminder that today's session was recorded. Following this panel, you'll receive an email with a link to access the recording or the on-demand. If that does not come through or something else happens, you can always go to the DevOps.com website at DevOps.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section where you'll find that for you. Like I said before, I do have 4 $25 gift cards waiting for you. Please be sure to check your email, your spam folder at the end of this program. They are going to go out to Kasari K, Mary L, Dave B, and Nilius D. Congratulations to the 4 of you. Keep an eye out on your inbox for the gift card. And if you don't receive that, again, just let me know. You can reach out by email. Shiva, Deepak, again, thank you. And if you have any final notes, or any final words of advice or anything, let us know right now.
Thanks for hosting us, and thanks for doing this webinar. Very interesting discussion, and thanks, Deepak, for your time as well, and insightful questions, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike and Jared, for connecting, and yeah, nice to hear from you, Shiva.
Thanks, guys, and have a great weekend.
All right. And finally, I just want to thank everyone else for attending. If you don't mind, take a few moments to answer the post-webinar comments, the survey. It should pop up here on your screen in just a moment. My name is Jared, and I will be signing out. Thank you, and have a great day.